I just want to say something before I forget. Number one was what happened, a classic of mine, which is we went to visit my cousin my cousin Bobby, Jim's mother, and who I've loved forever. And I left my cell phone there. That is a very common practice of mine. My father used to say, if my head were not attached to my neck, I would lose that too. And the other thing I'd like to say is the four people who are organizing this could not be more attentive and loving people. And that should not be edited out. What motivated me to do the interview?
What made you want to do it?
As soon as Jim and Meredith told me about it, I blurted out, you wanted a subject? I'll be glad to do it. Why? I've done a lot of introspection over the years, and I love the two of them. So it was a combination, it was a win-win. I would do whatever they wanted, which they thought would benefit them. As I told people off the screen, I told Jim, this is, no matter what, this benefits me more than it benefits you. So it makes me think about my life and review it. I've reviewed some of the places where I was more hard on myself than I really should have been over the years. And seeing themes that I would not have thought about, I would know, but I wouldn't have articulated.
So can you articulate the themes?
Integrity, which we'll get to. Knowing thyself and doing what is in one's heart and not what the outside world suggests. Not getting caught up in that, from that outside world, with things like the goals of being able to manipulate people, as well as my partners at my law firm, for example. Perspective on life. There are hard things that we go through. I don't know how to measure, but certainly my depressions have been at times very deep. Only once did I at all think of suicide, and that was in a hallway that I couldn't have done it anyway, probably. And I was just thinking about it right before a doctor's appointment. But they've been pretty deep. No future. The last one that sent me into therapy was over the dean not treating me fairly, father-like figure, and for several months I was jealous of everybody, just everybody.
What other themes?
Spirituality, meaning finding a way to be with yourself and broader themes. Meditation is one thing I do a lot of. I've done since 1999, 14 years at this point. Synagogue. Family and friends. I didn't do these in order because they are maybe the most important. My wife would be surprised if she heard it, probably, but the 39 years with her have been really good, and to the extent they've been really good, she's been providing the goodness. Couldn't have a more loyal, honest person, giving without question. And there is a part that some of the giving is giving that I wouldn't much care about. She's a great cook. I love it, but if she weren't, hot dogs would be okay. Well, maybe not hot dogs. That was the one time in 37 years I've complained. And she remembers it. But kids, it's just been, without a doubt, the most satisfying part of my life, to raise my children. I did not want children, and primarily because I was afraid I would screw them up like I was screwed up. And she said, this is interesting, and she's not a gambler. Interesting, you can never bet with her. But she said, as long as you are open to it, we'll marry. So deep down, I have to assume she saw what I liked and knew that that was going to work out, and it did. But I don't view any of the parenting as work in any way, shape, or form. I can't remember anything that was that painful that the relationship didn't easily overcome it. My son was rebellious as a teenager, and my daughter stopped talking to me when she was in law school, or actually only a year ago. But those periods didn't last, and they hurt at the time, but they just it's part of a relationships where I knew that they loved me and I loved them. And I've been expressive, unlike my father. I had to know my father loved me because of what he did, but he couldn't say it to my face. I don't know. Certainly in this time and age, it's a hell of a lot better, and most people are able to. But, you know, I knew the story that he carried my college boards around in his pocket. He thought those numbers were pretty good. So,
what do you think your children have taught you most?
They haven't taught me a damn thing. I've taught them everything. Wow. They just taught me to be a human being. They taught me. Rachel helped me grow up. She was like a little, I'm afraid that if anything I did wrong with her is she helped me through unhappy periods as if she were an adult. We would, we'd go on a drive, or we'd go to the diner, or whatever we'd do, and she was just always solicitous of me. She knew what I wanted, and she was happy to give it. And then when Seth came along, she was just like that with him, and so she was very generous. And he and I were athletes. We bonded, and we never had any, the biggest problem we had was when I was coaching him, which was a real learning lesson. I was coaching him in Jewish Junior Basketball League, which is outside of the school league. And he was, if not Michael Jordan, he was among the very best players. And he was also tall. And of course, any coach with a tall person who's agile and able would want that player to go under the boards and foul out the less coordinated big guys, and then the game would be over. Well, he thought he was Michael Jordan in lots of ways, and Michael Jordan was not a rebounder. He didn't go under the boards. So Michael Jordan Seth kept shooting from the outside. And he was pretty good, and we got pretty far, but we never won a championship. And we had some, after the game, driving home, we had it out sometimes. But it was over. I mean, it was not, these were not breaks. And even, I mean, he drove Harriet nuts. But I really identified with him. She says I identified with him, that I lived vicariously through him. And in some respects, I do. He was certainly a freer spirit in many ways, including sex, but also drugs, and he was a wild guy in some ways. But I saw, it was unfortunate, but Harriet had two situations when she was late in high school and early college where she lost two friends to alcohol accidents, alcohol-related accidents. And she wanted to hold on tight to this, I wouldn't say he's a Vilde Haya, but he certainly was wild enough to drive her nuts. You know, one classic one is seeing, he comes into our house, Rachel's still at home, I don't know why, and he puts a note on Rachel's bed. Leave the alarm off, I'm going out again. So he was supposed to have been in for the night. So of course, Harriet discovers the note and sees him walking out and seeing his buddy pushing the car so they didn't have to turn it on until after it got past the bushes.
Yes.
And we locked the doors. And when Seth came home, he went and he realized he was caught. And that was one of the more humorous ones, but he really pushed her buttons and she tried to hold on, and as much as she tried to hold on, he fought harder. And now they're best friends. And he's an unusually appreciative young man. Not that my daughter isn't. They both are. I already said my father in some ways replaced my mother. My brother was like a team player in that regard. He was always loving, and sure, we had our competitive parts, don't get me wrong. But overall, he was always taking care of me. When we went to camp, advising me, helping me to write papers because I didn't think I could write English, guiding me. You should be wearing your glasses playing basketball. I always, from being this high, I want to go with Mark, I want to go with Mark. And Charles would sometimes say, Mark, take him along. And most of the time, Mark said, and which was, of course, right, because he's trying to keep up with a cousin and friend are 2 years older than him, and I'm almost 3.5 years younger than him. Yeah, well, he couldn't do that. But it's been a loving relationship all along. I had a lot of jealousy with him early on because he was so successful. And success, I should describe there as success in the outside financial business world. So I remember going to a building he was building. It was the opening of the groundbreaking, I think it was, of this skyscraper, 20-floor building. And here we are, my uncle and my mother, and he's there with his wife. And I am jealous and trying, I don't remember what I did, but my mother said, this is the two of you. You're brothers. Appreciate him. And by and large, that's the way. He bought a house at the New Jersey shore, living in Baltimore. And years later, he told me that the reason he bought it there instead of the Maryland shore was he was hoping that we could use it together. That didn't fully work out because of very different views of feelings, how one deals with feelings and children. He and Patricia are very private. And my theory is I'm an open book in that way. I don't know, there's some saying that you can't catch somebody in a lie if they're always true, something like that. And I'm not running for office. And I don't have business people that are, I probably lost some respect in my law firm because of it, but so I'm much more open with my feelings, and our parenting was different. We allowed our children to be a lot more rambunctious and complain and do whatever. And by the time our children were interacting with Patricia and him, his children were already past that stage, and they were two girls, and they were somewhat goody-goody in the sense that they knew where the lines were, and the lines weren't very, I shouldn't say that, I don't know what the lines were, but they certainly didn't have that same annoying factor. And I don't know, I guess he and she thought we didn't treat the place right. I don't really know all of it, but we stopped going there. But we had this place in Maine. It wasn't exactly a big deal. Well, my in-laws purchased a house on one of the Belgrade lakes. There are sizable lakes in mid-Maine. In fact, they had a lot of summer camps on them, and as a camper, we used to play camps from there. And they bought this place. They had the opportunity to buy a home on the water as well as the block house behind it, which was bigger and not big, but bigger, and had running water or something like that. So she didn't want to spend the extra money, so for $5,000 they bought the house in the back, so you have to walk to the water. It's a charming little house. Little when 4 people are living in it, and Harriet and I, started living in it right even before we were married. Indeed, we got to go there alone the first summer we went up to Maine, and until they died, we never were alone again there. And I had a somewhat tendacious relationship because I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and one was in close family quarters, and people wanted to eat at a certain time, and I was always dragging my heels, passive aggressiveness that permeated a lot of my life. So I would say I liked going there, but I wasn't wild about it. Some years I had tennis across the way. By the way, I transferred the athletics into tennis and got pretty good at that as well. And it's only, she died 25 years ago and more. And he died maybe 5 or 6. And it's only in the last couple years I really adopted it as part of me as well as her, and I love it too. They're nice people. There's a cove with, she's known the kid, she started there at 10. So she's been going there for 56 years, and I've been going there for 38. And so the people, and they aren't exactly the kind of people I associate with here. So that when last year we had lunch with a couple, he was an accountant, big-time accountant in Boston, and he bought this Campbell across the way that they had a very intimate relationship with the prior owners. And we're talking away, and after lunch I said, God, I'm going out to lunch with a real person. Because he was talking business and things that I know. But they're lovely people. They're honest and decent and loving and thoughtful. So, well, the one that's easiest to learn, to teach, is what my mentor used to say to me. And this was a guy he was a very solid community member, as well as being a fabulous lawyer. And so he mentored several people, both before me and after. But for the time I worked with him, which was for it was half time for maybe as much as 5 years. And across the table he would say, live and learn, but learn. And it took me 25 years to really go to what I dreamed about doing, which was teaching. I've always wanted to teach. And the firm went through a transition, and I was able to make a retirement deal with them and go teaching. And that's what I'm doing now. And as Confucius say, find a job you love and you'll never work another day in your life. And I haven't been working since 1996. A little overstatement, but when you're commuting 2.5 hours to Carlisle, it's a bit of work, but basically. And so I've amended it to say, even if it's very slowly, that one learns. And the firm was a rough place. It was known, it's called in the Philadelphia Magazine by some lawyer as a snake pit. And it was a tough place. It was ironic because I would say 85% of the people I had relationships with, they were good people, they were decent people. But there's some cultural differences between growing up in Reading and growing up in Philadelphia. Maybe it's not that, but certainly these were more sophisticated people, and they were much more strategic than I was. I was very much emotional. When I liked something, I did it really well, and if I didn't like the client or the lawyer I was working for, I was less than excellent, regrettably. Fortunately, on the big matters, I liked somebody. So a classic would be, Guy's my friend, I play tennis with him all the time. He's on the executive committee, I'm up for a move. Well, I never worked with you. You know, I can't push you real hard. Or I've just spent 2 months really saving a case. There's 200,000 pages of documents on a non-used floor. The 2 hotshots have just lost the motions that begin the case. It's now discovery. And I take it over, get a great paralegal. We organize this thing. I'm taking depositions in Chicago, etc. So we're now up before the executive committee. And I say, you know, I took this over from Bobby and Norman, and the 3 other members of the committee, yeah, right, you did better than they did. They were younger and stars in their minds. And Ian doesn't say anything. And later he says, sorry, couldn't make it. Of course I wanted you to. Maybe next year. That's, you know, you maneuver between loyalty and pleasing the powers that be. And it went from, I'd say I'm really qualified to teach because the law firm had the most honorable of people doing the most ethical things, and they had the least honorable doing the least ethical things. And one of them got me caught. On the first side of it, when I was a young associate, I was with a client. He told me a story. We went to the file drawer and we're reading through the file, and we both read this document. He said X, this document says minus X, 180 degrees. And he says, "Oh, that document doesn't belong there," and he rips it out. Now, everybody, lawyer or non-lawyer, knows you can't destroy evidence. I went to my senior partner. He said, "There's no one client here that means more than 1% of our business. Don't worry about it." I never heard another thing until I was up for partner. The senior guy then wanted to make me the example of how you change this democratic structure. So he tried to make me a special partner, which now is common. They're called not salary partners, but non-equity partners. And Bernie Borish, my mentor who said live and learn, he said, "Howard, no way, I've worked with this guy. He's making partner, no strings attached." Ironically, Howard got me. I both benefited and ate my heart out because of Howard later on. I had a case for the son-in-law of one of his best clients. And it's a case, I don't quite know why, but I found it very upsetting, and I go and tell him about it. It's on a fast track. It's got to get to trial. And he says to me, "Tell me who the judge is." We go before this judge, and for the first morning, it's going like any other case. I'm to tell Howard who the judge is. I called him up and said who the judge is. At the end of the break, the judge comes out and he says, "This case is dismissed." Huh? Almost no explanation. I don't think there was an explanation. It was just out of the blue. I don't even know if there was a motion pending. One can infer what happened. Howard walks into my office later that day and he is laughing. And he sees I'm not laughing and he walks out. I don't know if we said a word. He might have said something, but. So I was caught with, and I really don't know the rules then. It may have been I couldn't disclose, but I probably could have. I mean, I'm almost sure. No, I'm not sure I could have. Actually, that's not true. I never did the full research as to when. Under the present rules, I was obligated, if I knew that he was not qualified or there raised questions about his qualifications to be a lawyer or his integrity, I was to report it to a disciplinary board, and I was supposed to report it to the court if there was a fraud on the court. In both of those cases, I have to know. And it's taken me a long time to understand a real lesson from this, which was maybe in a lot of ways I acted like I wanted to be Jesus Christ, but I wasn't crazy. And I didn't take on the most powerful man in the firm. You know, they could have subpoenaed the phone records. They would have been able to prove they talked. But that's all they could have proved. And he would have said, "Yeah, he told me, and that reminded me I had some political favor to talk to him about or something, and I called him." I didn't talk to him about the case. The judge would say the same, and where would I be? I'd be trying to get a job in Macungie, Not Allentown, Macungie, because the reputation would go that far. Well, I didn't have the strength to do that. And I learned something very important about that in teaching my students.
What's that?
I can't beat up on them too much about what they disclose. I think they have to disclose when there's a destroyed document. They're going to rationalize without my teaching them what no is. And there are things lawyers know, and rationalizing, I could say I didn't know, but for most purposes, I knew. I mean, you put the 3 steps together, tell me who it is, I call automatically out of dismissal, and he laughs. I mean, but the lesson I think for the students is, okay, so maybe you weren't ethical in that matter. Be careful and get away from whatever it is that got you that so that it doesn't happen again. I never worked for Howard again, although I don't know that it was intentional. And indeed I benefited from it. The next time I was up for a promotion, I had one guy who was backing me because of what I was doing in environmental law. Howard loved me.
So,
very distasteful and a lot of guilt for many years. I would not be able to teach as I am today without the excellence I saw there. And I would not be able to teach today because of the ethics and lack of ethics I learned there. I learned an enormous amount. I just stayed too long. And even there, I really don't have a regret because of the emotional issues. This was a safe place. I could hide myself in a big firm, and if I wasn't productive for 3 months or something, nobody really knew it. They just said that in the composite of Donald Joseph. Sometimes he was really aggressive and bright. Well, most of them didn't really see all that. They just knew I was pretty good, but not a star. So I could have stayed, but it would have been under circumstances that I wouldn't have accepted. And there were several of us that they were trying to force into retirement. And so they gave us an opportunity to have a hearing, and I went to the hearing. And by the way, as soon as they told me, I realized, this is my chance, baby. I'm getting out of here. And I knew that there would be something to negotiate. And so I went to this this executive committee, and I had a list of 10 things. And I said, you guys are judging me. You don't know about this. And I did like 5 of them, and I stopped. I have another 5. All I want is to be treated like everybody else. Lou and Jim, they've been here the exact same time. They're getting retirement at their position. That's what I want. And the guy who was then in charge of the office after that said to me at an elevator, he said, boy, you got your shit together. And eventually I got all of it. Not without the irony of the politics, because a member of the committee who was my classmate in law school, in fact we did a research project together, he wanted to back out of the deal that they had made with me. But they made the final deal that got me everything to tell the other leaders, the unethical leaders that had been there, go fuck yourselves, we're in charge now. Now I was the symbol. So I had retirement for 15 years, 96 to 2009 I had a retirement that would have gone on for life had the firm gone on for life.